Let's talk a little Clemson recruiting, and we have Paul Strelo, Tiger Illustrated. Paul, finally, welcome to the show. You've actually been requested quite a bit in the comment section, so welcome.
Good to be here, and great to be on the On3 team. It's great
Yes.
to work with you again after a decade, and a lot of the national names. It's fun to be a part of a very reputable team we have here.
Yeah. And now we get to talk Clemson recruiting with one of the best insiders in the country. Now, the Tigers are 10 days away from the start of fall camp, which means recruiting is winding down. So let's talk about what is left on the board. And one prospect I want to talk about is running back Amari Thomas. He's fresh off this decommitment from Florida State. We know South Carolina is trending here, but is Clemson a factor?
Well, Clemson will be a factor if he backs off his August 9th decision announcement. I think if he sticks with that date, all signs continue to point to South Carolina as the direction he goes. I think Clemson probably foremost among several schools that are trying to get him to go into the fall, get up back on some campuses, take some visits, and kind of go from there. But that recruitment's been a little impressionable here and there. Obviously, he committed to Florida State, but set up some official visits early in the summer to go to Kansas State even, and some other schools. So the door hasn't always been closed there. And I think right now Clemson is seeing if they can get him to extend things into the summer. But as circumstances stand, I think South Carolina is the leader in the clubhouse, and odds are that deal probably gets done by the end of the summer for them.
All right. Well, that's one to watch. All right. So Clemson has the number 12 ranked class in America. Looking back on it, on some of these big battles, what do you think the biggest win was on the recruiting trail this summer for Dabo and his staff?
Man, that answer changes like by the date, because within the last 2 weeks, just Clemson getting Dre Quinn over Texas with some of the victories the Longhorns have had, to beat the Longhorns or any of the Texas schools for a guy they wanted down the stretch is a pretty significant flex. I think anytime Clemson gets a receiver out of Florida, that has been a dynamic marriage. And so to get Naeem Burrows, I think really opened people's eyes in late spring that Clemson's going to be a significant factor for this cycle. But I think if there's a big win overall for them, it is offensive line in general. It has been very difficult for them to change the narrative over several years when you competed against either Georgia for some guys, or you're going for the offensive linemen that the Michigan, Notre Dame, and Penn States are going after. But for them this spring, with Matt Luke to collectively get a Chance Barkley and beat Florida and some others from him, to beat Alabama and Miami for Grant Wise, to get Adam Guthrie away from Ohio State. I think they have changed the narrative around offensive line recruiting to where you can then pull Carter Scruggs, who's had a great spring circuit in the camps, to close with Leo Delaney and getting him over Michigan and Tennessee. So I think collectively they've got their best offensive line haul in many years from top to bottom with the depth. They've gotten some 5 stars, the Jackson Carmans before, but to go 1 through 6 like they have, both with quantity and quality, I think has resonated within the fan base, as well as changed their perception as they go into the 27 class and are trying to recruit some national names there.
Yeah. So what remains in 2026? Is there a chance that Clemson doesn't take any more high school athletes?
I think there's a chance when you look at the fact there aren't any names. You mentioned Amari Thomas. He's out there. DQ Forkpo, the linebacker from IMG, but out of Georgia. Clemson has been involved with him for a while, and On3 and Chad Simmons have reported that Michigan is really the one that caught his eye and backing off, committing to what we presume to be Florida earlier this month. But Forkpo has maintained his communication with Clemson, and I think Clemson has a chance to be in there long term as he carries things into the fall. So Clemson still has some positions that did not address this class. They don't have a running back, as we've referenced. Linebacker they do not have, and could Forkpo be that guy? But I think there are several positions, those two mainly. But they'd like a big corner, a 6'1" type guy to go with Shavar Young and Marcel Gibson in their class. But those don't really grow on trees. Right. So I think you see how the season plays out, and you get a sense for, at running back, for example, does Gideon Davidson, their highly rated freshman, come in, and does he become RB1 projected for next season? David Ezeamume and Jay Haynes coming off injury. What does that room look like toward closer to the end of the year? So I think there's several positions that you kind of feel out what you have early on in the season as well as midseason. And then as the carousel moves and maybe names come open, I think that they could take one or two toward the end of the year, but there really isn't a fish on the hook right now that they are carrying into the fall that you can say, all right, we're going to be tracking that to the end. I think if there are two biggest needs remaining for this class or for this year, it's you look ahead to 27 or the 26th season and defensive end. I think Bryce Perry Wright could have been part of that solution.
Right.
But they don't really have another veteran that you see profiling to start next to Will Helt next year. Does somebody open up on the market, or do they go to the transfer window for that after the season? As well as offensive line, you've got a number of freshmen coming in, but as you look ahead to the following season, you've got 3 to 4 guys you'd pencil in as starters. Do they need another offensive lineman to kind of bridge the gap there? So there are circumstances that will play out through the course of the year that will dictate what does the high school board look like, and then where do they go from there?
Yeah, and, a big season. We'll see what happens. They could circle back on a guy like a Bryce Perry Wright. There's a few others in the state of Georgia as well. Maybe we see Clemson finish with a top 10 class. We'll just have to wait and see, but they got the quarterback to do it, a veteran program. So Paul Strelo with Tigers Illustrated, thanks for stopping by the Inside Scoop. Looking forward to talking Clemson all season long.
Yes, sir, Josh. Appreciate it.